Good morning, and on behalf of the State Department of Career Tech and Dr. Marcy Mack, our State Director, welcome to our virtual Oklahoma Education and Industry Partnership Professional Development Series. My name is Delbo Leach. I'm a Regional Coordinator here at the State Department, and as Regional Coordinators, we serve as liaisons between the state agency and school administrators across the state. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you our OEIP team members. Gina Hubbard is our Divisional Manager of the Education Partnership and Customized Services Division. Patrick Clannon, Kara Pattison, and Karen Talbot are Regional Coordinators assisting with the OEIP. And then we have also Lori Broyles, Lori Laufer, and Max McKnight. Lori are Regional Coordinators, and Max is our Divisional Manager for the Business and Industry Services. If this is your first OEIP experience, we welcome you. This year, for the first time, we're offering the OEIP experience monthly for 1-hour sessions throughout the school year. Our goal is to provide insight for educators like you to better understand what industry needs are in Oklahoma in hopes of preparing your students to develop a career pathway toward personal success. Now, before introducing our presenters, we'd like to say a special thank you to our sponsors that have supported the OEIP effort this year. They're now listed on your screen. We have the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, Oklahoma Career Tech, Pittsco Education, Meridian Technology Center, Tech Labs, Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance, and the Oklahoma Business Roundtable. In addition to sponsoring the OEIP, they're also going to provide a $50 gift card to a lucky registered participant in today's session. And Justin will be announcing that at the end of the session today. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Our highlight session today features Stillwater's own Meridian Tech and their Center for Business Development's Incubator program. Our presenters from Meridian Tech are Justin Hazzard and Brad Rickelman. Justin, the director of the Center for Business Development, has a passion to work closely with innovative entrepreneurs and assist them with developing a sustainable business model that brings their company growth. Justin received the Leading Edge Award in 2019, presented by the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce, for his efforts in advancing Stillwater's entrepreneurial ecosystem. He's a certified economic development finance professional, and he also earned his Master's of Business Administration from the Grenoble Graduate School of Business in Grenoble, France. Brad Rickelman, the Assistant Director for the Center of Business Development at Meridian Tech, assists new businesses and incubator clients throughout educational programming and one-on-one consulting in product development and in marketing. He recruits new client companies, mentors startups, serves as a community liaison, and teaches the center's entrepreneurship courses. Brad's background is in product management and business-to-business marketing. Join me in welcoming Justin and Brad. Gentlemen? You're muted, Justin.
Thank you. I think Brad is up right now. Brad, Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you all. I'm glad everyone is here. Just going to pull up my slide presentation, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk to you a little bit about entrepreneurship and business incubators in the incubation program. And certainly if you have questions or if there's something you'd like to ask, you can put it in the chat window, or you can just make a wave or something, and if we see you in the picture, we'll certainly allow you to do so. We'll go ahead and get started, and we'll go from there. You all will have access to this presentation afterwards, so we do want to have our contact information, and you can certainly email or call us should you have anything you'd like to talk. I'd like to talk a little bit as we begin more generally about entrepreneurship, and in particular entrepreneurship in Oklahoma and small business development, because I think it really helps us to understand better what's going on, and also the use or role of incubation as a means to assist entrepreneurs and startups. I found this article, it's now been a year or two ago, in our Oklahoman newspaper, which talks about the survival rates of new Oklahoma businesses over the last pretty much 20 years. And I think if you look over the 1, 2, and 3 year averages in their survival rates, And they were trying to make a discussion about recessions and the effect thereof. But I think if we look at it overall, you can see that the survival rate has fluctuated in years, some years a little better, some a little worse. But generally speaking, we're actually up a little bit, or at least we're fairly even. About 75, 80% of businesses make it through their first year. And I think that that's something that we often, I think, are surprised by, that so many of them do make it in their first year. But if you think about it, when people start a business, they usually come into it with at least some resources. And so to make it through the first year isn't it's certainly, you know, you need to survive, you got to make it. But in a sense, it doesn't really reflect much. But as you look over each year thereafter, it drops a percentage or so. So it goes from 79 in the first year to 68 in the second year to 60 in the third year. And as we were to track this out over 3 to 5 years, we would find that the numbers fall off fairly quickly. And so I think this tells us something a little bit about the types of businesses that are going to be successful. The types of businesses that are going to make it are those which are able to find a market, a customer base that is sustainable over time. Here in Stillwater, a new restaurant opens up and the lines are out the door no matter what the restaurant is for the first month or so. But after a while, and people get used to whether they like the food or not, those lines will go away, and likewise with any business. And so I want you to keep in your mind this idea of how businesses can succeed over a long period of time, because that's really what makes them able to be long-term successes for our communities. Overall, however, we've seen that entrepreneurship rates in the United States have either stagnated, that is, they've not gone up much, or in fact, they've dropped. And we can see two sets of statistics. These are from two different places. One is from the census, it's the bottom one. It shows that the number of new businesses created each year has dropped precipitously since 2006. The other shows over the last 20 years from the Kaufman Foundation, the percentage of the population that starts new businesses. Now, numbers and things like this are all over the place, but I think all of us can recognize that though we talk a lot about entrepreneurs, we talk about startups. I mean, every week, Business Week has something about some company worth $1 billion out in California. The fact of the matter is new business startups are declining overall in America. And if we can look longer term, we'll see that those numbers are in a period of overall decline long term. The other interesting statistic that I think is we've seen over the last 20 years is that where people are starting businesses has changed. We've seen a gradual transition over the last 20 years of startups moving towards the coastline, that is California, Oregon, Washington State, down into the Gulf Coast, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and away from the Midwest, particularly the upper Midwest. Oklahoma's stayed about same. The table here shows about 0.38% and 0.39%. So we're about even across the board. But generally speaking, we're seeing startups moving towards the coasts and the Gulf Coast and away from the Midwest. And I think that's a reflection of where economies are the best and doing the best overall. And I think that we can learn in our own areas that we realize that we're working with a demographic shift overall as well. Now, it's very difficult to find data about startups because the Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce has not been they don't keep records in the same way over time, and it's hard to know. But I've done some research here, and the top 5 industries for business startups back in 1965 were housing, computer technology, and think of computers as big IBM computers. We're not talking about microcomputers. Chemicals, electronically powered consumer durables. Think of electric razors and blow dryers and things like this, and automotive services and parts. Those are the top 5 startup industries in 1965. Today, candy, mobile apps, accounting services, fast casual dining, and green construction. Notice how the shift both is in the size and the types of industries that we're working with, the type of people we're interacting with. And so it's a very interesting change. And I think we can think about this in terms of our own lives. As our economy has moved towards a service-based economy, more and more of our startups are going to relate to direct business to consumer type of products, as opposed to business type of products. That has effects in terms of the volume and the growth, and in particularly the number of employees that are involved and how they're involved in our industries. And I think that makes a big difference. We know in Oklahoma that oil and gas is king. We know that that drives our economy in Oklahoma. But notice also that as that industry changes, the number of employees that are needed, how they're needed, the type of training that's needed, it's changing. And so that's something that we have to be reflective of, both in Oklahoma and across the United States. We normally constitute startups and entrepreneurs in some different ways. And I think that this is a nice way to describe the way they are. In most business startups, 76% are what we call micro enterprises. This is going to be essentially a person, a single person, maybe or two, that are doing something that is their primary focus of their business. These are your lawn care. These are people doing all sorts of things around in your communities. This is the vast preponderance of startups, are these micro enterprises. About 22% of your Main Street businesses, your restaurants, your dry cleaners, they can be often family run, they'll have a few employees, but they're going to be your downtown businesses. Only about 1% or 2% are geeks out in California creating Facebook. It's a tiny percentage of all startups, but most of the wealth is generated by those 1 or 2% of innovation age and second stage, meaning these are either going to be people that have gone to a new or they're going to be second stage in the sense of that they're going to be taking venture capital, things of this sort. So the vast preponderance of startups are going to be these small, micro, and Main Street businesses, but only a tiny percentage are going to be the innovation-led, even though most of the wealth is created by that tiny percentage. And so as we think about entrepreneurship and how we can increase entrepreneurship, we have to recognize who we are dealing with out there in the marketplace and what that does. And so we have so you have this kind of an interesting dynamic of communities see the micro enterprise in the main streets largely as the businesses they interact with. And yet the innovation ledge and second stage are largely the ones where wealth is generated. So as our policies get decided and we think about this, it's going to reflect differently in our communities. So what's going on here? Is this sort of transition of startups and entrepreneurship, is this a long-term decline? Have we sort of moved away from a place that we were before? Or are we in some sort of a technological valley? Most of us that are on here can remember back in, and it wasn't that long ago, in the 80s, when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have all this technology that we deal with today. And so it could be the case that what's happened is that right now things are a little bit soft because we've all got the cell phones, we've got the internet, we've got the type of things going on. We've gone through the .com craze, we've gone through these things. And so we're digesting a lot of this right now. But it's hard to say what's going on. But if you look down your main street of any small town in Oklahoma, this is just a picture here in Stillwater, but you could do your own community. All those buildings were once businesses. Every small town in Oklahoma, every one of those buildings was created by a business owner starting their business. Now today, most of those businesses are not the same ones that were started. Community after community, as you drive through rural Oklahoma, you will see businesses and you will see buildings, but no businesses. And I wanted to stress that because I think all of us realize that there's been this change that's gone on in our communities. So what has changed? I think there's been three aspects that particularly have affected us, and particularly those of us in rural or small communities in Oklahoma. One is what I'll call distance in time. It used to be that Farmer Bob would gather up the kids on Saturday and load them up in the bed of the truck and drive to, 5 miles from the farmstead into their little local town. They might pick up a few items that they can't grow on on their land. They might get a new pair of shoes. They might eat lunch at the cafe, and they might pick up some supplies for the farm and they drive back. And then once a month, maybe they might put on their nice church-going clothes and drive down to Oklahoma City or a larger community. Today, people get in their cars and drive 75 miles one way to get to their job. Our distances and our time have changed dramatically. People talk about how, where we're going to go and what we're going to do. Let's get away and go to Wichita for the weekend, kind of a thing. That's been a dramatic change. And so in our small communities, a lot of our small towns built up businesses to sort of satisfy the farmers coming in on the weekend. They're not there anymore. They're not coming into town. And so a lot of the businesses that small towns and rural communities across Oklahoma had, those businesses went away and they're never coming back because people don't need that business. They don't need a TG&Y on the corner so they can pick up a few items that they can't grow in their own town. The second effect is what I call disintermediation, which is a very long word, which just basically says the loss of the middle people, the distribution channel that happened between the producer and the buyer. We no longer need all these middle vendors buying things up for us. We can order from Amazon. We can have things directly mailed to our houses. We no longer need to go to JCPenney's to buy things that they can supply together in the stores. We no longer need a lot of this opportunity. We can do direct. And so that means, again, all those businesses that were buying up hats and be a hat store, you don't need it any longer. You don't need your local insurance agent in your town to take care of your insurance needs. You call USAA, you interact through the computer, you never once see a person or go into an office. Think of financial planners, bookkeepers, all of those businesses, all of those things we don't need as much. And that leads then to the third thing that's dramatically changed, which I think is technology. We deal with technology in a much different way than it is. Most of us are not on party lines any longer where we're listening for the number of ringtones as to whether that's our phone or not, right? But I think most of us could remember our grandparents maybe going out to the farm, and that's how they got around. There have been dramatic changes in technology. And for a while there was this idea that small towns are going to come back because now we can deliver internet into small communities, and that's going to bring these places back. But what we've learned is, I think, what we've drawn from this is, no, actually, it's made it even worse. Because people have realized that jobs and careers and futures are not in the small communities, and there's even a stronger move out of those communities. The only people left are old people and those people that are unable to leave those communities. And I think one of the lessons of COVID is that, we want these children to be able to learn from home. They don't have access to high-speed internet. They don't have access to any of these things. Technology affected them. And this affects in entrepreneurship because if we want new businesses, they're going to have to be places where people can take advantage of these things. And so the expectation that there's going to be this rush of entrepreneurship in our rural communities, I think is unfortunately going to be something that's quite difficult. And so I might finish my little piece of this is that, what can we do about this? And I call these Brad's 4 points because I'm not making some claim here that this is the way everywhere in America or what we have to do, but I think these are things that we've learned here from our incubator about how we can increase entrepreneurship in Oklahoma, and in particular, what we can do to help them. And I think the first one is better, stronger starts. That is, we need to have fewer bad business ideas to start with. There are too many businesses that are opening today which cannot be successful, which will not be successful. If we could keep even a percentage of those from opening and put those dollars into more better starts, we're going to have a better chance. All right. We have too many businesses which close almost immediately. The second thing is we need better programming, and I would put things like incubators, accelerators, economic development professionals, and career tech is a perfect representation of that as well. Better programming to assist these startups and small businesses as they get going so that they're able to get there long enough so they can survive, so they can do things. Money. I think for too long we've looked at loans, loan programs, matching funds, whatever it may be as the way that we provide funding to small businesses. I think that these are largely under effective in the way in which they're doing so. And that I think that grant programs are where we need to be putting direct dollars into businesses, and not with a bunch of, strings attached about matchings and thises and that's and these and that. You need to be able to put real dollars for two reasons. One, because real dollars are what the businesses need to be able to make their businesses successful. And if you have business owners spending all their time satisfying requirements of things, they're not working in their business. And two, because we've seen a great amount of narrowing of the wealth with which the average American is able to utilize towards business startups, right? We've had a tremendous concentration of wealth up at the top end, but a tremendous loss of wealth in lower levels. So if you have people, they're coming to you to start businesses, they're not likely to have $50,000 in cash ready to start a business, or $100,000 in cash. Most Americans, statistics say, cannot make it one paycheck in their careers. How are they then going to be able to create a business? If you say, well, do you have $25,000 to get started? They're not going to have that. So you want to increase that. And the last thing is the ecosystem. We have to be attractive to those who want to start businesses or are members of what I call economic growth populations. That is chemists and physicists and technology workers, and fill in whatever those people, what we're talking about here. We have to be attractive to those people, to those types that want to come here. And that's to say, we provide them the cultural and economic things that they're looking for, the bike paths and things. It's really easy if you live in Colorado, Fort Collins, you can bike or mountaineering and everywhere. I'm not surprised that entrepreneurs want to move to there. If you live in Palo Alto, California, if you can afford it, you would love to live in Palo Alto, California. But if you want to live in Cushing, Oklahoma, you better have some things that are pretty exciting to be living in Cushing, Oklahoma. And there are things like that. It could be you want to have land, you want to have cattle, you want to farm, you want to do something on the community, but you're going to have to do things that are attractive to these types of people. So with this, I might end with just a story. I found this out on the Facebook, and this is basically about a person who started a what he calls venue art gallery bar. It was called The Root in Edmond. And in essence, this person has started this business and it has failed. He's invested $33,000 of his personal money. He is well short of being able to keep this more than 90 days. He's worked 100 hours a week to try to make it survive. And now he's at the point that he's begging people to give him a few dollars so that he can keep this venue open a few more days. This is not the kinds of businesses that we want started in Oklahoma, not because we don't need venues, art gallery, bars. Of course we do. But it was clearly the case that this business was not going to be able to be successful. And thus, he's lost everything. That means it's going to take a while for this individual to get back into entrepreneurship. If we could have done some of these things to work with this individual to get started, if we could have made programmatically, perhaps there was an opportunity where this might be able to have been successful. And that's really what we have to be thinking about. With that, I want to turn it over to Justin, and he's going to talk about entrepreneurship, and particularly with regard to incubators as a programmatic way to help increase and sustain the entrepreneurship that's going on. And so Justin, I'm going to stop screen sharing here and turn this over to you and let you go on from here.
All right, thank you, Brad. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, fantastic. It's so great to be with you all today, and thank you for the invitation to present to OEIP on this session on entrepreneurship. I'm really specifically talking about the elements that make an entrepreneur, and then how can we as educators and people involved in the career tech education system make sure that we've got the proper environment that really raises entrepreneurs to the level that they need to be raised to be able to accomplish what they're doing within their field of scope. So good to see a lot of my colleagues across the state logged in today. Plenty of you have extensive experience in entrepreneurship. And so with that, I'd like to just make a note. If you've got a question or a comment throughout this presentation, don't feel that you need to wait until the very end to ask, raise your hand, or post something in the chat box. I hope this is just as much of a dialogue as it is a presentation. So with that, Brad, thank you very much for giving us that foundational macro view of entrepreneurship and what that looks like and how you can really further the opportunity for those entrepreneurs that are willing to take a risk. And if I could kind of stop for a minute and talk about what an entrepreneur is. I mean, I think sometimes we get hung up on the academic description of it, but I think it can be summed up with really more of a personality type of what an entrepreneur is. And it's somebody that's got tenacity. So they've got this grit. They've got good instincts. They're able to look at data points and modify their plan moving forward based upon what the data point says and what the qualitative information tells them. They're passionate. They're not doing this for the money. I don't think any entrepreneur started their journey and ended up successful because they had a yacht in mind. It wasn't the yacht or the second home in Martha's Vineyard. It was really about developing something that created value for their customer, whoever their customer was. And the last element I think that makes for a good characteristic of an entrepreneur is an appetite for risk, right? And so we'll use that to really segue into, well, what is a startup? So we're talking about incubation, and then that pivots into the startup. Well, the startup is the vehicle for the entrepreneur. The startup is really, and I think this is important to notate, a startup is a temporary structure for a business to exist and establish proof of concept and scalability, right? And so in Brad's last slide, we realized that temporary structure, the root, was certainly temporary because it didn't have scalability or long-term viability. It didn't have a way to generate revenue, whether it's through paying customers or a nonprofit model. The business model was flawed in some sort. So keep in mind as we go through this discussion today about business incubation that startups are very much an agile entity. A lot of you are probably familiar with Seth Godin. He's kind of a self-proclaimed marketing guru, Seth Godin. And he really discusses in most of his presentations about innovation and technology and leadership, this concept of the lizard brain. If anybody's familiar with the lizard brain, that is what has enabled us as a species to establish ourselves, to be secure in our environment, to eliminate risk. And I think one thing that entrepreneurs do very well is they can dial down the lizard brain that says, this is risky, this is scary, I'm going to leave my tail here and go and hide underneath a rock. And the entrepreneur understands, okay, there's a little bit of risk out here in the open environment, but so long as I can take a calculated risk and I know what the risk reward element is, I think I can survive so long as I'm tuned in to the variables that might change over time. So with that, let me see if I can get my slide deck up as I share my screen with you guys. Okay. All right. Okay, so you should be able to see my, my PowerPoint slide right now. What is a business incubator? And I'll make a differentiation that incubators and accelerators are sometimes used interchangeably. We like to really identify an accelerator as a program or a platform that has a start and a stop, and it more or less moves through a cohort style of programming. Our business incubator here at Meridian Technology Center is not necessarily cohort based, although some of them are here in Oklahoma. And incubators really like to generate what's called a spirit of cooperative reliance. There's a different way to say that, is that the spirit of cooperative reliance is almost about engineered serendipity, right? So it's kind of a funny juxtaposition of words, but engineered serendipity really speaks to the magic of what incubation actually is. If anybody stepped foot inside of a well-ran incubator that had life to it and energy, you recognize that there's something magical about the people in the building, about how the various startups that are in the facility are not curated, but they're selected based upon personality type, ambition. And so when you get a group of like-minded individuals in one space, something happens, all right? And I like to kind of encapsulate that in the term water cooler magic, right? And so it's about the shared space. It's about those unscheduled interruptions in the hallway that lead you to your next eureka moment as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship inside of a business incubator started way back in the 50s. It was a very cutting edge concept that was actually borrowed from corporate America. You might be familiar with the term skunk works. All right, so if anybody's kind of studied any of the skunk works project, is how can we as a corporation instigate and accelerate internal innovation? And so they would actually hide this type of innovative product inside of a bunker or far removed from the corporate campus so that those scientists and the engineers could work without the boundaries of the corporate environment and the restrictions that really happen within a large office tower. So incubators tried to mimic that back in the 50s. And if you fast forward to today, we now have almost 1,400 incubators in the United States. And that number comes from our international association, INBIA. And that's actually where you can go to look up to see almost a full directory of those incubators across the United States. I will notate that the vast preponderance of incubators are nonprofit. And those that are really engineered for a for-profit motive, or they're actually built on top of a for-profit platform, most oftentimes they do not make their money off of the rents, right? That's an equal exchange. The value proposition for a for-profit incubator is actually built on top of the long-term investment. So they're really, in essence, a private equity group or venture capital firm that's not cloaked, but designed as a business incubator. I think it's important to talk about the role that incubators play within the overall ecosystem. And so if you're involved in entrepreneurship, we've seen this word batted around over the last few years, and it kind of gets a little bit worn out when we talk about ecosystems, but I think it's the best way to really describe it, is that you see that incubators are just one element within the entire ecosystem. You have corporations, and most often that looks like a donation of some sort where they support entrepreneurial activities. The media is very engaged in covering those startups. If you've got a copy of the Journal Record, maybe 3 days out of the week, you'll actually find a highlight of a local entrepreneurial startup. You have tentpole companies and startups. So let's think of maybe some tentpole companies or startups in Oklahoma. I think one that kind of comes to top of mind that had a fairly healthy exit recently is We Go Look. You might be familiar with them. It's a financial technology startup that was sold, and now it's operating as a larger corporation. Here in Stillwater, one of the early companies that came through our incubator eventually in the last couple of years ended up placing product on Mars. So through a cooperation between NASA and Ditch Witch, Frontier Engineering Systems and Frontier Electronics actually developed product after an early initial start. Not that we're taking credit for what they achieved, but the incubator here was a place for them to begin the foundations of what that company ultimately ended up being, which is an aeronautics engineering and manufacturing company. You also see that universities play a significant role in developing startups, government, investors, so forms of capital. All of those things collaborate together to make a healthy environment for entrepreneurs. I would also like to point out that as a part of this system, career and technical education actually has significant programming that's designed specifically to help early stage entrepreneurs. So these are high school juniors and seniors that are maybe working on a senior engineering capstone project that actually has a product that may have actual traction in the marketplace. Or there's Business Professionals of America. So if you're in the career and technical education system, or you're a career counselor at a high school, one of those avenues where you can plug your students in to begin getting that early stage experience as an entrepreneur is certainly an opportunity through career and technical education. So if I could speak specifically about the Center for Business Development, and I think a lot of what we do here is very similar to other incubators throughout the state, is that we provide residential and associate incubation. The difference between those two is a resident receives 24/7 access to the facilities, and we'll talk about more on that here in just a little bit. And the associate incubation looks kind of more like, you might be familiar with the term co-working. So where an entrepreneur has access to a facility, but it's more of a nomadic desk, or they're not really assigned an office, and they've got a little bit restricted access, but they can still partake in the programming and some of the amenities provided there. A lot of what we do in terms of value proposition for our clients at our incubator is through consultation, training, and networking. Oftentimes, It's not that I have a scheduled meeting with one of our clients. It's that my door is always open and someone walks by and says, hey, Justin, can I close the door for just a little bit? I need to ask you a couple things. I think what turns out to be more often is Brad and I turn into a sounding board, not that we have the answers for someone that needs FDA clearance and a K10 prop. You know, it gets very technical sometimes as you're working with entrepreneurs, but they just need someone to say, look, here's what I'm thinking. Does this sound right? And more often than not, we're not giving answers, but providing the proper questions to guide them through the process of growing their company. So if we could backtrack a little bit, if you look at some of the major innovators that you've seen products, so maybe it's a household name such as Facebook or Method, which is a green cleaning chemical or something like that. You go, okay, so how can an incubator have helped that startup get through that process of what they're doing? By nature of innovation, that means you're doing something in an area that doesn't exist. You're doing something beyond the scope of existing technology. You're doing something that maybe doesn't have a proven track record. But I think the recipe for our incubator, or any incubator, and even accelerators for that matter as well, understand the pathway for a startup looks very similar no matter what the actual product or service is, right? So it's about reducing risk. It's about identifying your customer segmentation. It's about really keying into what that value proposition is and understanding what the capital structures are. So how can you raise funds to be able to support this innovation and support your company as you continue to hire on, aggregate inventory, pivot as the market changes. Those are the kinds of things that incubators are very good at, is understanding what is the common denominator between startups. For our facility, we host all types of workshops. One of those is Entrepreneurship Essentials, so helping early stage ventures really get their feet wet into, okay, how can I build a plan that helps me move forward? The challenge with the business plan often is that the plan is expired by the time the ink dries when it comes off the printer. And so our job is not necessarily to make sure that they have a good set of documents to take to the bank, but that they have a full understanding of what the variables are going to be as they move forward with creating their startup. One of the programs that we host here in Stillwater, and that I think there are maybe 10 or so other locations throughout the state in Oklahoma, is 1 Million Cups. And that's a great pathway for an entrepreneur to be able to engage with the entrepreneurial community and to really identify who are those in that community that can help them continue to advance their idea. Then how can the community engage with the startup ecosystem? It's really kind of a mesh between the two. And so if you've heard of 1 Million Cups but haven't attended an event, I certainly would hope that you do sign up to find the nearest one to you, because it's a great way to understand what are some of the challenges that startups are facing, and then what are some of the resources available for those startups. It's kind of, as I would put it, it's a mashup between Shark Tank and a TEDx presentation. It's a kind of a good amalgamation of the two. Through the Center for Business Development, I'll also add that we provide to all of our clients a very long list of amenities. Everything from package to delivery to security systems to 3D printing, and we've got a small business office. All of those details that can distract an entrepreneur in a standard lease agreement, right? So they can find a space similar to ours in Stillwater, Oklahoma City, or Guthrie, but I think what we do differently is we view ourselves as the detail people. Okay, so let's go ahead and in the time remaining, talk about facility design. So here in Stillwater, we're about 25,000 square feet. We can accommodate between 16 and 20 entrepreneurs at any given time, depending on how much space they occupy. I would also like to notate that we have right now in process a new facility coming up in Guthrie, which is the South Division campus, which will be a business incubator as well as a conference center, and then also adult and career technical education facility, laboratory, etc. So very excited to see that facility come up in Guthrie. And so if you're ever coming into town from I-35 and you take that first exit into Guthrie, you'll drive right by our facility. And so we look to have that actual grand opening and the ribbon cutting in early January of 2022. Okay, what does a good tenant look like for entrepreneurship, and specifically in a business incubator? Is that they're entrepreneurial oriented, that they have a desire for coaching. For example, if Elon Musk applied to be in our business incubator, I wouldn't technically say it's the greatest fit, because Elon Musk does not have much for us to offer to him. Meaning that we provide just as much coaching as in value as we provide in real estate space. Does the business model that they're working on, is it scalable, right? So for example, somebody that's working on a consumable product that maybe has a very small market that's more of a micro enterprise, maybe not entirely scalable, but we would love to coach them and consult them, but it may not be a perfect fit for tenancy. Additionally, it needs to have some type of innovation element to it. And so a good example of that would be a wealth advisor or an insurance agent may not be a good fit for an incubation program like ours, or maybe even throughout the state. And one thing I would like to notate is that as the companies come in, we are not screening for optimum success. The last person that should be a judge of a business at its early stage is anyone besides that entrepreneur, whether or not that thing could be a success in the marketplace long term. And I mention that because as a business goes through this startup process, it's continually in this adaptation mode. So to mirror that, we also have full agility with the way that our facilities are designed. We allow the companies to continue to expand as they are here in our facility, but then also sometimes they contract over time as well. And so we can expand their footprint or contract. And then also we try to be agile as their markets are going to change over time. We've got several clients that have had to have significant pivots in their business model, and we were able to adapt our offering to them as well. If I could, there's a very short video. It's about a minute 45, and I believe Karen might have that ready to share with you all. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And the client spotlight I'd like to share with you all as we wrap up our time here. This is Charlie Fox with Pinstripe Pedals. He is a current client of ours, and it looks like Karen is ready, has that video ready to go. Karen?
My business is Pinstripe Pedals. I make musical instrument interface boxes and devices, and my target market is professional musicians and regional sound companies, recording studios. It was my first business, but it is one of 3 now. Became an entrepreneur kind of out of necessity. I had spent 26 years in the corporate world doing design and test of electronics devices for a major consumer electronics manufacturer. But just found that it was time for me to move along. My career was not going in the direction that I really felt like it needed to in the last 15 years of the race to retirement. And there were some other things that I wanted to pursue. All of the different avenues that you have to know or farm out. I've just naturally been an inquisitive person and asked questions and kind of paid attention to what other people are doing and just trying to learn how it is that they do whatever they do. And what I discovered was that I had actually learned enough of all of the different facets of producing a product and getting it to market and selling it. I had learned enough to fake my way through it, and or enough to find the right people to be able to make up for my deficiencies. Listen more, talk less, don't ever give unsolicited advice. Find a way to monetize giving other people your advice and experience. Don't be afraid to self-promote.
All right, thank you very much for that video, Karen. That's just one of our current clients. We currently have 16 companies in-house and about 56 employees spread across those startups. And I would like to say that one metric that we track and are very proud of is that the average wage for the companies within our incubator is significantly higher than the average county wage. So for those that are involved in economic development, that's a significant opportunity for your local economy to continue to grow and provide high wage opportunities for those people that maybe aren't entrepreneurs, but would like to be a part of that technical journey as a startup continues to grow. And so in the last couple of minutes, we're now getting very close to the end of the presentation today. It's about 5 till noon. So I want to be mindful of that. A couple things to leave you with, if I could. The most recent data from the State Department of Commerce is that in Oklahoma, there are 726 full-time employees that are supported through the entrepreneurial incubation system. And that equates to about 150 startups. So across the state, we've got nearly 1,000 employees that are being incubated and being carried along and supported through the incubation process here in Oklahoma. If you'd like to see a full list of the incubators in Oklahoma, you can go to the State Department of Commerce and find that data. There is a slide later on in my slide deck that you'll be receiving, I think, later on after this presentation is finished. And as we get to the very end of it, I think we've got a gift certificate to give away. Do we have a name for that yet?
In your phone. Look, check your mobile phone text.
Ah, I see. Okay. So if we could have a drum roll, the winner of the gift card is from the Red River Technology Center in Duncan, and that is Mr. Jacob Johnson. So Jacob, you are the proud winner of the gift certificate. I believe it's to Staples. So fantastic. All right. Good to see you, Jacob. How you doing? Okay, so with that, that concludes my presentation. At this point, I will hand it back to Career Tech. I don't know who's taking control at this point.
I'll do that. All right. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Brad. We really do appreciate you guys. We appreciate your willingness to present what it is that you do, not just for industry, but for education in Oklahoma. And I know you had your contact information up earlier. If you want to put that on the screen again, just here at the end, so they can get an idea of how to contact you, either through email or by phone. Again, this has been Meridian Tech and their Center for Business Development that's presented today for our OEIP. And this does conclude our OEIP for September. However, we want to make sure that you understand that we're going to do another one in October, and to be sure and watch for that. Our tentative date is Wednesday, October 21st. And as soon as that date is confirmed, then we will post the registration on the ODCTE website. All right, and there's the contact information. Does anyone have any questions here before we conclude? Any questions or comments? All right, thank you. Thank you so much. And this concludes our OEIP for September. Thank you for participating.